Hey friends, I'm Sabrina, the rookie around here. John and Dick are the old school American fans of F1. Thanks for taking time to listen in on a conversation Dick and I had assessing the F1 team's progress so far. 3 things are clear. Red Bull is dominating. Ferrari's woes continue. Between 2023 and 2024, they switched team principals, but things are not changing. And when it comes to the midfield, there's really no clear frontrunner. It really is a question of who will win the upgrade lottery. Hope you enjoy our conversation. Dick, I am looking forward to this discussion of your mid-season report card for the 2023 F1 calendar. And we're going to break this down and do 2 separate conversations. This one that we're going to do is on the teams. I think there are some headlines that we want to make sure our audience thinks about when it comes to your overall report card is that one, we're looking at Red Bull's dominance, right? And so that has to be put into context that as we look at the rest of the field, that is a pretty amazing moment in F1 history to see this, and then also how that pours over into the driver aspect. So we're not trying to be unfair or eclipse any of the stuff that Red Bull is doing, but we want to be realistic at looking at how we're assessing the rest of the grid. With that kind of premise, I'd like to just kind of go through each of the teams and you give us essentially 1 or 2 points as to why you came to that grade that you have given that team. So let's start with the one who is dominant right now. Red Bull. What do you think is the thing that people should take away as to why you gave the grade and what is that grade?
Yeah, so you have to give Red Bull an A. I kind of went back and forth in my mind. Do I give them an A plus? Or do I give them an A minus because of the way that they haven't really managed Sergio Perez? I think that there's a little bit of that going in there, but at the end of the day, I'm picking nits because I was looking for some nits, quite frankly, because they have been excellent in all respects. Not only is the car amazing, the team's had the right strategy, they've had the right people in the right place doing their thing. So it's been an amazing reflection of an amazing organization that Christian Horner has pulled together. I think it's interesting that, in terms of the RB19, the car that Red Bull is running this year, really it's a continuation of a story that we've been seeing now for several years. And that is Max is the only guy that can drive that car. It's interesting, we've seen Albon and Gasly and certainly they brought in Sergio, and Sergio did better than Albon and Gasly, but on the other hand, he was more experienced and he's won some races and all that kind of good stuff. But at the end of the day, it's still a car that's designed for the way that Max likes to drive, as we've discussed before. And so that's one piece of it. I think the other piece of it is there's a lot of things that Red Bull is doing right in terms of the engineering on their car that, one small piece enhances the performance of another aerodynamic piece on the car. And they have really done a great job from the tip to the tail of figuring out exactly what the air wants to do going around that car. One of the things that everybody knows is that the DRS system on that car is just insanely effective. And I think what's so interesting to me is the rest of the grid hasn't figured out what it is that Red Bull is doing with their DRS, because it's clearly a massive advantage. And so anyway, got to give them an A for all practical purposes. It's as far as who's going to win the Constructors' Championship, who's going to win the Drivers' Championship. I don't think that there's any question that Red Bull is going to take both of those. I do think it will be interesting to see if they can pull together a perfect season. McLaren came very close to that in the late 80s, and it was only some bad luck and tripping over a back marker when the back marker was being lapped that prevented McLaren from having a perfect season.
Okay, what about Mercedes?
I gave them a B minus. Just super simple. They developed this concept for their car last year. They improved it during the 2022 season. They came back with an improved version of what they had last year, and it has not worked. And so I can't really give them any place to go hide, given that they've got amazing resources. They've got a history of being able to develop cars. They certainly have all their processes and tools rules in place. And they should be challenging Red Bull, and they're not. And so I give them a B minus.
What about Aston?
So Aston Martin, they're sitting third in points in the Constructors' Championship. These guys surprised everybody, maybe even themselves. They produced a car that at the very beginning of the season, out of the box, was really quite good. They've already almost quadrupled their points haul from last year, and we're not even, we've just passed the halfway point in the season. So I've got to give them an A minus, man. I mean, they've really done some great things. The caution that I would throw out there is that we have other teams like McLaren that are starting to look really strong, and Aston Martin had better be able to figure out how to stay in the development war and learn about that. They are just now learning what it takes to do a full season and be competitive. And so that A minus could go away very quickly if they're not able to keep pace with everybody else.
Okay, Ferrari.
Ferrari. I want to be a fan of Ferrari. I mean, they are, the national team of Italy and all that kind of stuff. And I just like the tifosi and everything about Ferrari. But let's just get real here. They sacked Binotto at the end of last year as team principal. They brought in Fred Vasseur, who's, of course, he came from the Alfa Romeo / Sauber team, very much a skilled veteran team principal. And I don't see that they've made any progress at all, which leads me to believe that given the number of team principals that they have gone through over, call it, the last 10 years, that leads me to believe that there is a cultural issue going on at Ferrari, because they're a circular firing squad. That's all there is to it.
When you say cultural, are you meaning team culture and like what is inside that actual institution and their culture? Or are you saying Italian culture, or maybe both?
Yeah, I would have to go with both. Again, they are the national team of Italy, right? And people are incredibly passionate about Ferrari worldwide, but especially in Italy. And so when Ferrari does well, the newspapers are singing their praises. When they're not doing well, the newspapers are absolutely destroying them. And I think that rubs off, right? So it's a little bit of the team culture for sure, but then there's the Italian culture where there's so much expectation over them. And let's face it, I mean, Ferrari has broken a lot of hearts since, what was it, 2008 when they last won their 2007 when they last won their world championship. So, yeah.
Mm-hmm. I think that's interesting, and I would love to have a future conversation even just about that, because when you say it's both, then you have to wonder, is there any option for it to ever change? But right, for the sake of time, we will move on. McLaren.
Yeah, McLaren, I love the fact that they were so honest and said when they rolled out the car, hey guys, we put the car in the wind tunnel and we didn't hit our targets. We're going to be really, really bad for the foreseeable future. However, we know where we made the misses. We're going to go and correct them, and then we are going to be competitive. And sure enough, they delivered. They acknowledged that they were not where they needed to be. And everybody, the drivers, the engineers, the people back at the factory, they just got on it, man. It's been very impressive to me at the leap in performance that team has made. So I give them a B minus, but it's only because they screwed up at the start of the year. But I mean, that grade could certainly improve by the end of the year.
Alpine.
What a disaster. I mean, just wholesale chaos. I had said sometime earlier in this year in one of our podcasts that I really felt like Laurent Rossi was the biggest problem that Alpine had. Kind of proved it. That team ended, or I should say went into the summer break, is a better way of putting it, in just wholesale chaos. There's rumors going around now that Michael Andretti is looking to buy them. That can't be good for morale back at the shop, at the factory, even though it'd probably be a huge step forward for them. But yeah, I think that Alpine has really underdelivered this year, especially when you consider the fact that Alonso left them, went to Aston Martin, and while Ocon and Gasly are certainly both very talented drivers, they're not the guys that are going to come in and galvanize the people back at the factory and all that. Alonso Alonso's that guy, and I mean, you can just see it. I mean, they're at a third the points that they were at this time last year, and it's just, yeah, hate to see it, but it is what it is.
Williams.
I've always been a fan of Williams. I was a fan of Williams when Frank had it, and they were just this little team that would show up with one truck and a really cool car and kind of a driver with kind of an attitude, and they'd just go out and take care of business and score solid points. And as they grew and began winning championships and all that, I rather enjoyed all that. And so it's been really hard for me to watch Williams suffer for so many seasons as they have. And yet this year they've begun to start turning around. You can just see it, that they are, while there's a huge gap in points between Alpine and Williams, if you're a racing driver, where do you want to be? You want to be at Williams or Alpine? I'd be at Williams, because I think that's a team that is on a positive trajectory. And I think that they're starting to have a car that is becoming more and more of a surprise contender at tracks that suit that car. If it isn't the fastest car in a straight line, man, that thing has got to be close to the fastest, because you go to a track with some long straightaways and all of a sudden Williams is in the mix to get into Q3. So I give them a B. They've really put their heads down and done the work.
I really like how you said that about Alpine versus Williams. If you were someone looking where you wanted to go and work, I think that's a very good point about the chaos aspect that you had highlighted when it came to Alpine. Yep. And now here in Williams, after so many years of people kind of just wondering what's going on there, yep, and this up track of the team, that's a really great way to look at it. Haas.
It's an interesting thing. If you look at the Haas car, they have a design that is actually quite a bit different around the side pod areas and all that, compared to some of the other cars. It's like they've gone in a little bit of a different direction. What's interesting about that is that it clearly, on some tracks, it really works pretty well. And then on other circuits, maybe not so much. Certainly they have two drivers that are certainly capable. And we've seen it, on certain tracks, they have at least qualified well, maybe faded in the race, but they qualified well. Given that they are truly a team that they're still, they're still an upstart team. I mean, they're the newest team on the grid. And I think they're doing a great job. I give them a C+.
And for those who might be listening and thinking, oh, it's Americans being easy on Americans, that's not factoring into your analysis, is it? No, you want
performance.
Alfa Romeo.
Oh, what is going on at Alfa? This year has just been a struggle. I mean, they don't look very close to at least finishing P6 like they did last year in the Constructors' Championship. They lost their team principal, Fred Vasseur, went to Ferrari. But, I mean, he was replaced by Andreas Seidel. I mean, come on, that guy is seriously competent. So, you just kind of got to wonder what on earth is going on with them. This is their last year as Alfa Romeo, I believe. They're going to be Audi starting next year. They're located in Switzerland, so that's always going to make them just a little bit on the different side, as opposed to building the car in England, where you've got all the resources and people that are available who they live just down the street, so to speak. They don't have to uproot their families to go to work at that particular factory. They've always had a lot to overcome, and it's a good little team. But man, they're just not getting it done this year. So I give them a C-.
Well, and I think it's very interesting that you highlighted the transition of ownership. And looking at this season, we talked about this offline. It's just hard to see this struggle of this team. And I kind of look at it as a placeholder season. They're petering out, and hopefully we'll see what we saw of Williams, after a very difficult few years. Now on the upswing, maybe with new leadership, it'll have that ability. Okay. Last one, AlphaTauri.
Man, they miss Pierre Gasly, don't they? Again, this is one of those deals where when they had Yuki Tsunoda and Nick DeVries driving there, they did not have either driver being the kind of guy that could just kind of walk in and galvanize a team behind them. Prior to that, they had Pierre Gasly. Gasly was obviously really looked at as a leader at that team. The leader left, no one to fill the gap. Now, with the sacking of Nick DeVries, I think Daniel Ricciardo comes in. Certainly he knows how to lead a team. I would expect to see a turnaround at AlphaTauri. I know that they've got new aerodynamic bits that will be on the car, for the season when they return. So hopefully they can pull themselves out of the doldrums. I've heard rumors that next year the AlphaTauri team, or whatever they're renamed, it may be Hugo Boss, believe it or not. The rumor has it that they will be driving the RB19 and instead of something that they built on their own, which I think is an interesting deal. I don't know how that goes with the regulations, but why not? So I give them a C minus.
I really would be interested to see what those regulations allow. Wouldn't that be very interesting to see that RB19 against what we would assume would be an even better version? Yep. And to see those two teams next year competing. And if one of those seats was occupied by Daniel, and him giving a little competition from a kind of deja vu from years gone by, right?
My goodness, yes.
Yeah. So that's really exciting. Okay.
So, but if this brings up an interesting question. If AlphaTauri is able to get that done, what does that mean for somebody like a Haas? Does this mean that they could run the 2023 Ferraris? Because the 2023 Ferrari is an instant improvement over what Haas has today. Just asking. I think it opens a can of worms.
Mm-hmm. And remind me when the regs changed again. I forget all the time.
They changed for 2022.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah, you would think that this might be, if this is an opening that no one's ever closed, golly, that would be kind of amazing. But then it seems like it would be this situation that would, if that was an opening available, that would allow for that testing. But of the concept, I guess this is the lawyer in me coming out, but I would see that you would need to have had a long range plan to execute this. You couldn't just flip to that, right? Especially now with the cost cap. And how quickly would you be able to take advantage of that loophole if it were, if that actually did exist? Okay, so I broke my internal rule because I wanted you to have the priority of the time. Say your statements without doing probably what every listener is accustomed to, me asking a bunch of follow-up questions. And I broke that right at the end because I couldn't resist with that last one, Dick. But I have to say, you had so many different areas in your report card that I wanted to ask even more questions because, as always, you're very insightful and you're fair in your assessment of either the teams or the drivers. I hope that our listeners benefited from seeing this mid-year conversation, your mid-year takeaways, and this will help them as we look to the rest of the calendar and see where could we be surprised and where could we see some amazing opportunities for these teams to move forward. So thank you for taking time and sharing these thoughts.
Thank you.
Okay, friends, what do you think about the grades Dick gave to the teams? What do the teams like Aston Martin, Mercedes, Ferrari need to do to compete with Red Bull? How do you think McLaren and Alpine will fare as the season moves forward? Have you been surprised by Williams' progress so far? Think that it can continue? Drop me a line via email, sabrina@2guysaGirlandF1.com. Have you rated and reviewed us in your favorite podcast app yet? If not, please take a moment to do so now. New to the podcast? If so, check out our earlier episodes where John, Dick, and I share our F1 origin stories. Thank you to our followers who are supporting the show. You are making this show possible. John, Dick, and I don't take it for granted. If you're not a member already, check out the Support the Show link in the episode notes. Are you following us on social media? We're in all the usual places. Thanks to those of you who are sending messages and comments. Feedback from you, our listeners, our Two Guys, a Girl, and F1 community has been humbling and really encouraging to John, Dick, and me. We know that this is a crowded market, so your words have been and continue to help us build a community and content that we believe in. Thank you. And with that, let me say, that ends this conversation. But rest assured, we'll keep talking and you can keep listening in because we're just two guys, a girl, and F1. For John, Dick, and me, Sabrina, thanks for listening.